what is wrong here? You know, I think people often talk past one another in South Africa. We're angry at one another because things are wrong, but there doesn't seem to be a critical mass, or at least not in the media space sometimes. It might just be reporting. I don't think we should confuse the two. I think on the normal people in South Africa are actually pretty decent to one another, generally. But you know, you need to actually agree. You can fundamentally disagree with someone, but you have to agree on the method, the method through which you find solutions. A lot of that also is emotionally healing. It psychologically heals.
This is Solly Moeng. Welcome to another session of WorldView. This is where we explore everybody's perspectives on things that can broaden our worldview. We continue to have these conversations about South Africa, where to from here. So we were supposed to have today with us Mr. Velenko Sitlabini, the new leader of the Inkatha Freedom Party. We have a representative, Mr. Walters, Thomas Walters from the Democratic Alliance, the official opposition in South Africa. Now, this is a discussion about whether or not we keep trying the same things over and over again in order for South Africa to finally get to stand up on its feet again, or do we come together to imagine something else? Now, Mr. Walters, your political party, the DA, is obviously the biggest opposition party in Parliament. And big somewhere else. It's big also in the provincial government of the Western Cape that it leads, and several municipalities. It's also in coalition elsewhere in the party, in the country. But I think in order to change South Africa's direction, you have to take the levers of power for foreign policy, for economic policy, for policy on policing, all of these things, education, health, social development, etc., 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 away from the Tripartite Alliance, which has been failing us over and over again. Do you think that this can be done by waiting for elections to happen so that you can then again go and compare notes with your fellow opposition parties to say whom you go into coalition with? Or would the DA be prepared to have pre-electoral conversations with other parties, like-minded parties? And there will be convergences and divergences. This is South Africa. But are you prepared to have conversations before to say, guys, how about we unite around an ideal of a South Africa before the elections?
Maybe and you must stop me if I'm taking that too far. I'm in your hands. I think, first of all, we need to have a historical perspective of where we are. We had a undemocratic establishment. In fact, our country is just over 100 years old. We're new as a state structure. It's a new democracy and a new system that is finding our feet. And I think in many respects, even a party like us, who are, we are ruthless in holding power, speaking truth to power and holding power accountable, people in power accountable, we celebrate the progress we've made as a society. We don't believe the South African miracle has died. What we are saying is the South African miracle is actually continuing. Right. So what we had was from an authoritarian, undemocratic state, and I don't need to go. We all know. We are referring to apartheid here. We went into a democracy. The democracy, there's a good constitution. That democracy then got, call it, degraded by an over-concentration of power. And of course, we believe a philosophy in the ruling party that's not consistent with constitutional principles. There's an internal contradiction that the ANC has faced, where they're in charge of implementing the constitution, but they don't quite believe in it themselves. But it doesn't mean that things fell apart. And now that contradiction has caught up with him. And I think in many respects, much as it's sometimes traumatic, we're going into a period of time where there's a second transition. We're actually moving closer to where we are supposed to be.
But just a minute, before we go there, You talk about the ANC, but the truth is, South Africa is governed or misgoverned, I like to say, by an alliance of the African National Congress, the Communist Party, and COSATU. Now, you have communists embedded into democracies that were never voted for, but some of them are ministers. They implement stuff that South Africa has never voted for. So maybe we have to call the beast what it is. It's not that the ANC is that and that's why they cannot agree on so many things. That's why they don't know whether they turn left or right.
It's a coalescing of various interests that got thrown into one pot. And I'm going to say something that some people might find controversial.
Well, please do.
The ANC is an apartheid institution. It was created by apartheid. It was created in opposition to apartheid. It threw a lot of people who don't otherwise have a lot in common: policy ideas, cultural background, way of understanding politics, and it has now caught up with him. In a sense, corruption wasn't just an act of dishonesty, and all these many positions and the doubling of the state structure was to keep this thing together. And what we are seeing now is it's starting to fall apart. And yes, there's going to be times in the future where we're going to get worried. We saw some of that already. But I do want to give the listeners hope that we are, in fact, in a transition. And that transition is taking us close to what our Constitution intended. People are, in fact, standing up. Now, people like yourself, people like myself, people are speaking their minds. And I think that is, our Constitution was designed to reflect that diversity of views. And that's what we're seeing now in coalition politics emerging. Maybe I should pause there, that I don't...
Yeah, I hear you, but I mean, the ANC alliance, or the Tripartite Alliance, has been very powerful. I mean, I laud that the DA for having always looked it in the eye. You know, sometimes you had to go to the court. I don't know how much money you guys spend on lawyers, you know, just to get the ANC either to answer a question or to do things right. But I think we need that. We need voices, as you say, even Helen Zille's voice, somebody that so many want to hate, because we cannot afford to be afraid of politicians, even yourselves. We can't be afraid of you guys in the Western Cape. We can't afford to be afraid of anybody in politics. But we have turned into people who treat politicians as heroes and heroines. I mean, they continue. I don't know if you guys feel the effects of load shedding. I mean, those who are driven around in motorcades and who live in sheltered accommodation paid for by the ever struggling communities around South Africa. People who are now afraid to walk the streets in their own communities, but you guys are protected. Surely we've created some kind of Orwellian animal farm effect in South Africa. Do you guys just want to replace the ANC to be the next big guys, or are you saying there are systemic changes that must happen?
Let me first of all say, I'm sitting right now in a house that's affected by load shedding, and I can pick up the computer and go and show that we're very much directly affected by it. And I think if you can maybe put it in perspective, you are not after the money and the positions and the status. If you're a party that had 1.7% of the vote in 1994 and worked incredibly hard to get where we are today, you know, there's real fundamental belief in what we are doing. And of course, you'll find people in politics that needs to be disciplined. And I think we have a proud record where the DA can say, ultimately, even if they fight back, people who do wrong in our party, we hold accountable. We're proud of that. At the same time, where I do agree with you, you can't just be a party organization fighting elections, you know, doing party stuff. You can't become a caste of people that are removed from society. And one of the projects that the DA is actually linked to the coalition approach that we are taking, we call it the whole of society approach, where the government and the private sector and community organizations on an ongoing sustainable, it's a triangle of cooperation. Government facilitate independent, actually adds to its own capacity to get things done for people as well. You facilitate the unlocking of resources from the private sector for specific things that makes a difference in the lives of people. You would see signs of that around our local neighborhood watch systems, the sharing of information between the police, the state, and companies and communities. There's a number of projects there that we are very proud of, but we see it as a long-term project. You won't necessarily see the DA running around saying, there's an election coming up. It's a very broad concept, but what we are effectively doing is using where we have influence to restore an independent civil society, not one that's aligned to a political party. And I think that speaks to what you are saying as well.
Yeah, but the civil society must organize itself. It mustn't wait for the political party to organize it or to define its parameters, right? So South Africa is framework. Yeah, but the question is still, are you guys, is this coalition that you're talking about one that is post-electoral? Now, let's imagine 2024. Are you prepared to sit around the table with others before the elections to say, hi guys, we need to, how do we change how can you work together to put together an attractive, diverse, post 2024 leadership of a cabinet for South Africa, not after the elections? Are you prepared to sit before and say, and you must remember that it doesn't mean that you must go in those kind of discussions saying our president or our leader must be the president. It must be South Africa is suffering. South Africa is on its knees. Let's agree on an idea, and then let's identify an individual who might be best suited to be the leader of such a multi-party coalition. And maybe part of the changes would be we must have conversations about the powers that are currently sitting in the office of the president. My view is that there are too many powers in there. And even former Deputy Chief Justice who was punished or denied a promotion by Zuma, he did say, look, we thought everybody would be like Mandela. Then we had people like Zuma and others abusing those powers. Surely individuals do go mad sometimes if we put too much money or too much power into their hands. Do you think about those things?
Well, I think you in fact, the way you're putting it far better than I am. The putting of politicians on a pedestal. Now, we have it's part of our liberal philosophy. Liberalism is about, we believe the individual must be empowered. We believe in empowering people. I can put it to you like this: you know your own needs better than I do, so I must give you as much control over your life as possible, as long as you don't infringe on the rights and other people's right to do it. That's essentially what we believe. And the way that translates into what you are saying is a political party, and that whole of society approach that we're talking about. The objective is not to recreate the ANC. It's actually to create people independent of a political party. It's not to expand our own power. It's to empower people. And part of that is to empower them from us as well. Just in terms of, I think that's the nub of the question that you are going to come back to, so I'm not going to even try to duck.
Yeah.
The truth is, there's no way that I can here today say that there will be a coalition before an election or after an election. It's simply too early. It is something you can't force either. If a political party pushes it too hard, it also becomes domination. It creates its own problems. You have to build consensus. What I can tell you, you would have noticed, the DA is actually for many, many years been saying that it will support any realignment of politics around the values of the Constitution. So what I can say is that we're compared to 4 or 5 years ago, the habit of talking to one another, the habit of comparing notes, the habit of cooperation, that is deepening. I think much as there's also huge disagreements between the political parties, the fact is, despite those disagreements, you will notice mayors get elected, budgets get passed. Already it's better than what we've seen in local government with the ANC in those particular metros. So what you are seeing is similar to what you feel. I can hear it in the way you speak, that you feel society is now ready for this kind of thing. You will notice that kind of process has started. Whether it's going to translate into any of those scenarios that you described, that's too early to say. But I can tell you there's no willful, short-sighted obtuseness about it, if I can put it that way. We know that we must talk We know that's the future. We know we're going to be cooperating, and we find things that we agree on, and not just the things we disagree on. Let's put it that way.
Well, you see, the things I think that we all know that you members of parliament, sometimes you are falsely referred to as public representatives, but you are not public representatives. You are party representatives. The interests of South Africans come second to those of the parties you guys represent. That has to go away, surely. And the powers in the presidency have to be kept somehow. Don't you believe? Because you see, individuals. Look at what's his name, Ramaphosa. He came there, charming. He speaks good English. He walks along the promenade. He runs. People just love to hug this guy. But individuals go around. Some people even described him as the last hope for South Africa. But then one day he stood up and said, "I would rather be seen as a weak president than to be seen as one under whom the African National Congress divides." So it's nonsense. I mean, anyone who doesn't fear the electorate and can stand up in front of media cameras and say those kind of things, he did that. Anybody else in the future could do that. So we come, they speak well. We think somebody who speaks well is necessarily intelligent, especially emotionally intelligent, empathetic. South Africa is such a diverse country with such a painful past. We have, whatever we do, we cannot sacrifice this diversity. We can't. This diversity is a wealth that makes South Africa. Us. Exactly. We make this. But you can't have a president with a chip on his shoulder or on her shoulder. A president who comes in to say, "My people," referring to a portion of South Africans. When you are president of South Africa, all of South Africans have got to be your people. Otherwise, then there's a problem the minute you do that. So people have done it over and over again in the past. We have to change that. We can't say, let's change solely with, represent, replace Ramaphosa with solely or with Anik or whatever. We need to say something has to change in the way we do things. It's not just a matter of replacing X with Y. It's a matter of how do we look at the checks and balances? How do we make sure that nobody, under whatever circumstances, can go rogue on South Africa again? And if they do, the checks will be so strong that they'll be out.
No, the power is not with politicians. And maybe I say this tongue in cheek. If I go and walk on the promenade of Sea Point, nobody knows who I am, so I'm not bothered. You know, but you're not. As a politician, you're not a celebrity. You're not important. You're a servant. And I also would like you to know that most politicians work incredibly hard, and they do it for the right reasons. And I think that type of thing, that type of politician will also emerge more strongly if they understand that they're there to connect with the people, connect with civil society, that ultimately whatever systems we put in place, it's at service of South Africans. And I agree with you. I celebrate our diversity. It's what makes my country so exciting. Everything we do, it's not just in politics, but that, call it coalition, that kind of a engagement, that comfortableness with one another is something that should be actively engendered and taught and encouraged. It's become second nature. Just to bring it back a little bit to the DA, I don't mean it arrogantly, but it is a fact that the DA has, way before it was flavor of the month and people started talking about it, the DA was very strongly in support of electoral change. You will recall the Van Slabbert report. The DA supported. We believe politicians should be accountable for the public. There are lots of systems that, in fact, local government, you combine your party political system and your ward system in such a way that you get the best of both worlds. That lots of parties are reflected, but you also have accountability. So the DA supports that in principle, but as always, the devil lies in the detail. Again, we should feel strongly about it, but we should work very purposefully and carefully in that direction, that we don't create another car that stops halfway to its destination.
Yeah, look, it's okay for you to be arrogant. Actually, we welcome arrogance here. Look, I have a problem with this often repeated claim that all politicians or most politicians work hard, or most ANC people are good people, because the overall outcome is not good for South Africa. Look at where the country is. If most politicians are working hard, what are they doing working hard? Look at South Africa, it's not getting better. It's not getting better at all. So what are they doing? Working hard for their parties, working sure the parties staying. Do they appreciate the plight, the pain of South Africans, of men and women working in the street or in their homes, whatever? I don't think they do. If you say most politicians are working hard, show me the results.
No, I accept your counterpoint there. I think most politicians work very, very hard, but the question that you are raising, it's not very effective. They're not doing it very well.
No, then something has to change. Then something has to change.
Yeah, and there's only one way that can change, and that is for people to vote out the ANC. That is the change that we require. That's the accountability that keeps politicians humble. And the same thing goes for the DA. If the DA becomes anything like the ANC, and then we abuse power and we start killing the very reason why we exist, and actually start contradicting our own values, then the DA must be dealt with in the same way. That's the nature of a democracy. So I agree with you that there is a phenomenon where politicians have nearly become a society of their own. They work in a reality of their own with the jargon and a debate of their own. And yeah, there's only one way to deal with that, and that is to hold people accountable. And this is, if I can urge your listeners there, the time has come for civil society, people in their communities, in their streets, to understand what power they actually have, not to fear, not to leave it to other people. You never leave things, your own environment, to other people. You can get help, people can do things for you, but ultimately the country can only work if, not just in politics, but everywhere people engage. And that's what makes countries that are very successful today. That's incidentally one of the features.
Okay, I want to go to my original question, almost rephrase it or paraphrase it. And let me give this little historical fact. When the African National Congress first got into power back in 94, it had supporting it South Africans who were hardened for, as we say in South Africa, of apartheid, who said, we don't want this thing anymore. And those South Africans came from NGOs, they came from the UDF, they came from the end conscription campaign, they came in all colors, all sizes. They said, we have one enemy, it's apartheid, let's get rid of it. There was a Nelson Mandela and an ANC, they said, let's stand behind these guys. And the overwhelming majority of South Africans voted for these guys. And the ANC has stayed in power all these years, not as a single political party. It stayed there supported by the Communist Party, COSATU, other people who still believed it is the government of the people, by the people. Of course, we know it's not, right? Now, to unseat the ANC, to move South Africa to its next level, post-colonial, post-apartheid, we need to now move to post-ANC. And to move to post-ANC, I contend that people have to get together again before, put their little differences aside, and said, we need to get together and remove the ANC, and then we can reimagine a South Africa. Because what you're going to do, you guys, the DA, there was a time when the DA was hoping, especially when my money was there, you were hoping, we probably were on the right way to becoming a potential replacement of the African National Congress. But you've gone back a little bit, but that's not the discussion for today. Even Stan yesterday, I asked him, now says, even in his public pronouncements, he likes to say, look, we don't think we'll remove the ANC on our own, we'll work with others, etc., etc. So he doesn't, that hope is gone, that the DA will be the national body, governing party of South Africa. Now, you have to work with other people, and it shouldn't just, the solutions South Africa seek shouldn't just come from political parties or existing political parties or the plethora of individuals who speak well, who dress well, who come to say, now I'm going to be the next president. Even Zuma's son is going around telling the world that he's going to be the next president. And South Africans, NGOs, religious groups, everybody must come together. And the DA has got the power and the resources and the knowledge among working with others to say, let's get together. Let's have some kind of national conference with South Africans. Let's ditch normal campaigning for the DA. Of course, you can't change the system until you get into the system. I totally understand that. But we have to unite South Africans, not just in politics, in a broader society, and say, guys, we're in trouble here. I kid you not, if the ANC stays in power beyond 2024, it's finished.
again, you're preaching to the converted. It's what you're referring to in the DA's thinking. We say that coalitions actually work at a number of levels. You have the one that's between politicians in a government there. That's one small part of coalition politics. You also have societal coalitions. You referred earlier to the fact that the ANC actually stands on the back of a societal coalition, and politically it's manifested in the Tripartite Alliance as well. But you have to have it at a societal level. Also, incidentally, the state. Now, I'm not talking about the political parties that are in charge of them. The actual institution of the state is a highly complex and an enormously big organism. You need a coalition amongst, in terms of professionalism, the culture. You need, actually at 3 levels, you need a broad coalition for South Africa to work. And yes, that is the kind of thing that, it's expressly what we are trying to do as the party. The only caveat I have to what you said there is you must just keep one thing in mind. It's not just enthusiasm. It's not just people responding to the moment that delivers success. It's sustained effort. It's people. It's about creating systems of human interaction. It's about finding those opportunities, dealing with some of the egos, that comes along with it. Yeah. It's far more than call it value shared and common purpose shared than between political parties. It's at all levels of society. So it won't be, in my view, just a copy of the UDF. I think it's going to be different. I think it's going to be also far more embedded in the 21st century in many respects, might even be more international. But I think we can both agree that you can see today a younger generation, people also practicing a different kind of politics. There's going to be space for that. In fact, it's going to be a very exciting time for people who find politics interesting. And it's not going to be what the mainstream media tells us today it's going to be either. I think the mainstream media in South Africa is becoming less and less important as an opinion form. It's social media. There's different people understand politics and connect with politics differently. But I'm also not saying it will be on a virtual world. I think it's going to be both. Your grassroots activism, your virtual activism, I think it's going to be combining, and I think ultimately it's going to be positive.
Would you, the DA, I know that, would you, the DA, support a system where there's a rotational presidency? In other words, you have some kind of national council, obviously taking into account the provincial makeup, supposing we keep the provinces as they are, where no individual is made an all-important president. They are there for 1 year or 2 months, 1 year or 2 years. On a rotation, obviously there would be normally elections every 4 to 5 years. But you don't have somebody who says, yeah, now we're going to do this, now we're going to do this, and they get away with it, or refuse to approve this or that. So that it's just a symbolic. The president is there to receive foreign heads of state, to represent South Africa at the UN, at other national or binational or multilateral organizations, but important to keep South African people together, and referring only to the constitution, not to some kind of party manifesto. Do you think that system would work, or do you think we should have a good president in the current system, whether it's...
So for me to say, for me to give any kind of answer there, frankly, it will be my own opinion. It won't be. So the DA does not currently have a position on that, because it's also one aspect of a far bigger conversation. But I think the underlying principle there is we don't like big man politics. We don't like people concentrating power at the top, that the people at the top must be accountable, that they must... That principle is certainly something we understand. Exactly how it manifests, time will tell. We must have those discussions in the DA. But most certainly, one thing I can say with huge confidence, I mean, it's always been part of who we are. We believe in devolution of power. There's many examples in our current constitution where people assume, for example, that national government gets the biggest slice of the budget and municipalities struggle, and provinces often can play a far bigger role to support municipalities. There's a lot of in our existing system that is the way because it's simply not being challenged by enough people. Right. So there is a lot we can do within the current system to I don't think we sit with a terrible constitution. I don't think we have to throw it out, anything like that. I think within the framework of the constitution, and obviously, responsibly look at how you can improve it. There's enormous scope for something like that. Incidentally, if parties had to be agreed to, it doesn't have to be in the constitution. Parties can actually do that between themselves. So I would say we are very cautious with fiddling with the constitution, the rules of the game. One must respect the rules of the game, even if it's inconvenient. But what you can do with it and interpreting it the way it should have been interpreted, taking us back on course, that most certainly the DA supports.
Right. So I like to quote what Barack Obama said soon after he became president of the US a number of years ago, and he addressed the joint sitting of parliament in Ghana. He said he made a long, beautiful speech, part of which was that Africa doesn't need strong men or strong women, if you want. It needs strong institutions. Now, in South Africa, I think that South Africa is arguably the only country in the whole continent that has put together good democratic institutions. But we have seen over the era of state capture and other continuing forms of corruption that it's not enough to simply have the institutions, because you could simply load those institutions with all the wrong people, whether they lack the expertise, the qualifications, or the ethical, emotional intelligence. They have no sense of public interest. They're parachuted in those positions for specific partisan outcomes. It's happened in South Africa throughout, and that's where we are at now. That's why I'm saying systemic changes. So we need to stop as South Africans and say, why has this thing happened? Why did it last for so long? Could it happen again?
No. And it also, just if I can add to that, the DA, in fact, adopted a principle at our last Congress. Obviously, we have our values. We have the things that we feel strongly about as the party.
Right.
There's belief, deep belief in what we do there. But we also adopted a principle that solutions must be evidence-led. It must be empirical. Sure. So part of a conversation, the kind of conversation that you referred to, it's the two of us can have our views about why this part of government or that part of government isn't working, but there has to be some kind of a consensus and a culture in South Africa that it's a cop-out to say, take land reform or take another emotion. People always say it's a very emotional issue. Of course, it's an emotional issue, but that comment doesn't help us. So if we can get to, and that could be part of that process of people engaging with one another, where we actually say, what is wrong here? I think people often talk past one another in South Africa. We're angry at one another because things are wrong, but there doesn't seem to be a critical mass, or at least not in the media space sometimes. It might just be reporting. I don't think we should confuse the two. I think on the normal people in South Africa are actually pretty decent to one another, generally. But you need to actually agree. You can fundamentally disagree with someone, but you have to agree on the method, the method through which you find solutions. A lot of that also is emotionally healing. It psychologically heals.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Look, we are a product, because of our diversity, even our constitution and where we are a product of multi-party, multi-approach conversations. There's no way that South Africa can be a country again where the winner takes all. And the thing is, over the past number of years, we've had attempts for winners to want to take all. You cannot. Our diversity has to be sacrosanct. I believe that entirely. We cannot sacrifice it for anything. So this thing that the majority is always right, in my view, is nonsense. The majority is not always right. Okay, but I want to give an example. I want to talk about But I support the need to devolve the policing authority to the provinces. But the thing is, that's also problematic because I'm just thinking of the Western Cape. I trust that the Western Cape. I like Alan Winde. I think he's a good standing man, leader, and all that. I've watched him over the years. I think that if the provincial government of the Western Cape were given more policing powers, it would probably do a much better job. I like JP Smith. I think that people might dislike him for others, but I think that he means well. You know what I'm saying? But I don't. It can't just be devolved to the Western Cape. It has to be devolved also to the Eastern Cape, to KwaZulu-Natal, to Limpopo, to Northwest, to Mpumalanga, etc., etc. We don't know that we have the right people in all of these provinces to take that kind of responsibility seriously, ethically, with the interests of the public at heart. So if we said, okay, fine, let's devolve the policing responsibility, which I honestly believe must happen, it has to come with conditions. It has to come with checks and balances. We have to be able to pull back or to control or to intervene nationally if something goes wrong in a province, because people could go rogue on us. So suddenly you give them policy powers, and then especially the system of tenders. Tenders go to friends to go and do crazy stuff, the results of which we don't see. So how do we do this and also think not broadly, not just in terms of but the province of the Western Cape can do well if we allow them to fight drugs and all that. But what about other provinces? They're going to say no, give it to us too. Anyway, it's impossible to give it to one province and not the other. We know that.
Well, look, you touch on an incredibly complex kind of conversation. So I suspect we're going to just touch on aspects of it. And in fact, I would love to, even if it's only over a cup of coffee, take that conversation further with you. It's fascinating. First of all, there is such a thing as where it's working, do it, treat it as a pilot, but then it also means that you at a national level have more resources. If you let the people who can manage their own, call it, so obviously within the framework of the Constitution and the law, you can devolve functions in some cases in order to have more resources in places where you can't devolve, as part of kind of a transition. So it's not necessarily wrong to devolve in some aspects and not others, but at the end of the day, what you want is all the provinces devolved. Mm-hmm. So I would argue it from that point of view. It shouldn't be an argument against devolving powers to the Western Cape, because it's not by its very nature going to monopolize resources. In fact, it's going to give more resources for a national government to do things elsewhere. Mm. The other thing is also, I'm not entirely sure whether I agree with the argument that a place has been mismanaged, therefore you can't devolve, because sometimes devolving is the mechanism to end the mismanagement, to get the people in these failed municipalities to actually hold the people accountable in their own area.
You don't hold people accountable who have been incompetent by giving more responsibilities. It's almost like saying, let's create another ESCOM, let's create another estate bank, but we've managed everything. We've mismanaged everything else that exists.
I hear what you're saying, but think about it like this: if you want that place to be well run, it needs to be devolved. You can bring it closer to the people and make it more effective. So part of fixing a mismanaged place would be a principle of devolution, but it's not. But devolution of power is not sacrificing accountability. I mean, in fact, what you are doing is you're letting the people that are best placed to do it do what they're supposed to be doing.
Right. With T's and C's, right?
No, and of course, and if something happens that is against the Constitution, dishonest, against the law, a lot of it boils down to just implementing the law and doing it and actually wanting to do it.
Right.
So I would say that devolution is a good thing. I genuinely believe that, but it's not balkanization. It's not ripping up the entire country and throwing the pieces out of the window. No, it's about function. It's about the term subsidiarity comes to mind here, where where people are best able to make the world better for themselves, give that influence and power to people, and something at a national level a national government is better placed.
But who determines that? I mean, in the current system, for instance, if you tell the ANC, come on, give us more powers, we are better off that we are better positioned than to deliver on this than you guys over there who are also ANC people, especially because the DA is seen as a white party. They're going to say, yeah, why you think white people can do things better than us black people? It doesn't get better in South Africa, right? So it's the ANC controls national government in the current system. To devolve to the Western Cape means saying to white people, we trust you to do this thing right, but we're not sure that Eastern Cape. I mean, Eastern Cape is a mess. Other provinces are in one or two other provinces are a mess. Who determines that one province can do better in a very objective way?
Well, look, in terms of the current assessments of that, it's the government's own assessments, not the DA's assessments that the Western Cape is being well run. It's not what the facts support that.
Sure.
But I think the quick answer is it should be determined not by people talking at one another, not by a governing party hiding from debate. I have a saying that the ANC only consults when they want to keep you quiet, or they want to consult you so that you don't cause trouble. Alternatively, they want to co-opt you, but they don't consult you because there's value being added by your views.
Right.
That is what, in a sense, CODESA, in the spirit of CODESA, got stopped. It didn't become embedded in our entire political culture, the way discourse takes place.
Right.
And I would also say part of the problem, look, it is an ANC problem. Look, there's lots of good people in the ANC. I don't want to be overly party political here, but there's an institution called the ANC. That institution there's a lot of people there who don't want to go to jail, so they don't want to open things up and don't want to be accountable. And that's a fact. We know that. We've seen it. There's an ideological predilection towards centralization of power. My view of communism and the types of socialists that you find in the ANC is human beings are instrumentalist. There's instrumentalist attitude. They are tools to win elections, but you actually treat them as a class, or you treat them as a mode of production, and there's a kind of a God complex where you can predict history and you essentially get desensitized to the suffering of people. I think that's part of the problem. People don't like letting go of power in that ideological mindset. And the other thing is actually something I've a bit more sympathy for. It must be one of the reasons people in the ANC can't let go, or don't let go because they don't know what to do. A lot of people must be terribly demoralized to see this organization that they believed in. And at one stage, that organization was part of a movement that didn't just liberate you, it also liberated me. You know, as a South African, there was a high moment. You know, of course there were undercurrents, but I mustn't just think it was Pollyanna. But there was
and it wasn't just the ANC. We must correct about the ANC didn't single-handedly liberate and apartheid.
No, you know how offensive some people in the DA find that as well. But the point is this: it was a high moment, and I think there's genuinely people in the ANC who are traumatized by what they've seen that the ANC has become.
Sure. Yeah.
And one thing the DA can do, and I think I think we are seeing more sensitivity from us in that regard as well. Those are the people you want back in politics. You want them to re-engage with politics. You don't want them
people like whom? Give me a name.
No.
Who you keep saying there are good people in the ANC? Give me one name, please.
No. I'm. You look. I'm.
This is political.
ANC. I actually believe and feel that the moment is where we are not talking about the ANC, except for where it presents an obstacle to getting our country where it should be. But I'm not in politics because of the ANC. I'm not going to start attacking the ANC in this meeting.
No, but I'm asking about the good ones, not the bad ones. I want you to just give me one or two good names. I won't ask you about the bad ones.
I'll tell you this. You remember the motion of no confidence against our former president, Zuma.
Right.
There was in one of those caucus motions, there were a group of ANC people, members of parliament, who voted for the motion to remove him.
Right.
Let's just say there were
like the Marcus and Causes of this world, for instance.
I'm not going to get into the names of people, but I will never forget some of our people privately going to some of those individuals who've just essentially committed political suicide, because people knew where they were. And the call it that quiet fortitude. So the way the people were walking out, they were sad, but they were determined.
Right.
And there were some people in the ANC that I certainly had a lot of respect for in that particular moment. Having said that, I am also hugely critical that they didn't fight earlier. That they didn't fight. The fight actually against corruption and domination started the day after the 1994 elections, and unfortunately, too many people had a free pass. So there is I'm not being soft about it, but I do think acknowledge the.
Okay, yeah, that's fair enough. Look, the DA, I think many people, as you say yourself, also even in the governing Tripartite Alliance, I think some will say directly, some will not. Many people agree that the DA has got some really good ideas. Some people even think that President Ramaphosa has recently announced, a re-engineering of the energy sector, comes from the DA. I think so because the DA, I've heard the DA speak about some of those, make those proposals before, and then suddenly they came from the presidency. But the question is, why does the DA seem to struggle to hold on to black talent?
I would put it to you like this. There is a environment where it's a kind of a catch-22. So here's the party, there's propaganda against the party was never just white, by the way. We're the only party with.
Yeah, I know, but the perception is there. Why?
No, but this is part of the point that I want to make. It's perception, but it's never been true. You can just, you can look at the votes, you can look at we can't have the percentage we have if we're a white party, but nevertheless, there is still that perception in some circles. So if you have a phenomenon where the media, or parts of the media and the governing party call us a white party, and then black leaders emerge in that supposedly white party, and then, I lost elections in the DA. I don't, make an announcement, or some other people will make an announcement, but nobody notices.
This is mostly black leaders who do that, who make announcements.
I think there is because of this propaganda that the DA is supposedly a white party, there's a heightened attention on black leaders that emerge. And then when people lose elections, as you have in politics, then that becomes a narrative of its own. But this is a matter of interest. And I'll tell you what I've noticed about that notion. In the media, people will refer to, there's black leaders leaving the DA, and then you actually look at when the people left. They're still quoting people that left in 2014. It's over 8 years, but it's quoted as if
it's something that's working for them, right? To keep repeating this lie, because the thing, unfortunately, you do have people in South Africa for whom, if you repeat a lie over and over again, it becomes.
It's fiddling the stats a bit, because it's not like these people are leaving right now. And the other thing is also that there's lots of different reasons why both white and black people, some people are in a different phase of their lives. There are people, not everyone leaving is necessarily unhappy with the DA. And so I think there's a bit of a superficial slur in that regard. Having said that, the party takes growing in all communities and nurturing diverse leaders very, very seriously. And when we lose talent in this way, obviously it's not something we celebrate.
Yeah. So Mahashule Ganya left you recently. What are your views on that? I mean, are you?
I happen to know him very, very well. I'm certainly I have a high regard for him. In fact, I'm hoping to engage with him, socially in the future. I'm saying this publicly. I've said it to him privately as well. I like him as a person. My simple answer is, I think his interests and his passions have shifted from the more narrow party political sphere. I think exactly what you and I are talking about, to engage more people in politics. I think it's not necessarily bad for the DA, what he has in mind. You would have noticed there's not particularly a particular animosity towards him. I think there's an honorable mindset there. And at the end of the day, I would say people have different parts in the story.
Right, but apparently there was a political, the glass ceiling above him. He's been trying to be elected higher for many years. I don't know if he deserves to be higher, but it looks like one of the frustrations that led to his departure is his failure over some 20 years to be elected into the higher echelons of the party. And
well, he was in the higher echelons of the party, and then he would not stand for a position. Then he'll stand again.
Okay.
In politics, people lose elections. I've lost elections. That's part of politics. I think it's far more than that. I think he just wants to do something different, frankly.
Right. Do you think that Black people, leaders, come in there for the material benefits more than to change society? So they get frustrated when they feel that they're not getting materially what they were hoping to get?
Well, in fact, I think that's I don't think you intend to be grossly unfair to our Black activists and members and public representatives. I'm just, from my personal experience, some of the most people that are in some of the most incredibly difficult circumstances have stood against an overwhelming political tide in the communities. There was no such thing of you join the DA and you get like material benefits, and therefore it's people who had to really go often against what the rest of their communities believe. They are pioneers.
Yeah.
I'm very proud of our call it Black activists in the party. Well, we have good activists all around, but I'm genuinely proud. I think a lot of what we see today of people challenging the ANC and able to criticize the ANC, they were the pioneers in creating that.
Okay.
So I don't think it's a bigger problem than any other.
Okay, but I still do think that I don't know how things work in the DA. You guys probably seem to need to have a conversation that says each time a person leaves and that person happens to be Black, there are going to be conversations. The same thing is going to be repeated over and over again. And then from where I sit, I see the DA being pushed onto the back foot, defensive. You need to say, how do we get this in? How do you make sure that if it happens in the future, so you need to change that narrative about the DA being seen as anti-Black whenever a Black person has aspirations to become, because I don't believe it's true. I really, honestly, personally, I don't believe. I think there's a lot of opportunism that comes in there because people love it because they know that when they push you a little, when you fall back onto your back foot defending yourself. You need to move away from that. Even in the Western Cape, people like to say, yeah, you guys talk about the DA doing a good job. Go to the Black Townships. What are they doing there? But they will not discuss the fact that in some Black townships in the Western Cape, government people get sent to either clean streets or do stuff or ambulances, and they get attacked. Nobody wants to talk about that.
It's also incidentally not factually true. You can make a calculation that X a percentage of every rand, if you use that and you look at what's spent on poor communities, you compare the provinces there, the Western Cape can factually claim to do more for the poor and for Black people than other provinces. But that's a slightly different argument. Of course, we come from a racialized history. People grew up with a certain, call it, and it's perfectly understandable, where do you fundamentally trust, given our history, do you trust people to really care about you? That type of, it's a subliminal, it's often subconscious sometimes. And that is it is something that certainly the DA constantly needs to be able to unpack and understand and demonstrate and continuously, how can I say, turn that mental framework around. It's not something that happens overnight.
Right.
One thing that I will say to you, and just to show you how it changed over time. Remember when the party was labeled as a Jewish party?
Was it? I don't remember that. Was it?
Maybe that's a bit before both of our times. But you know what? In the 70s.
Yeah, but it wasn't the DA. It was something else, right?
Then it was but you know it's
right.
our
okay.
ancestors, if you want to put it that way. Then it was labeled a English party.
Right.
Then it was labeled a white party. Then it was labeled a minority party, and now you see it starting to shift towards an urban party. So it is changing.
Right.
We are not unwelcome I don't feel unwelcome in any place in South Africa. It's more of an issue to get people to vote for you, to persuade them, and that you can only do by hard work and having your heart to have your heart always in what you do. That's what changes people.
Yeah. Do you, as a DA, have people, say, from the ANC, even the EFF, I imagine, who will not in public say you guys are doing a good job, but who will privately say, guys, it's really good, but don't expect me to say this in public?
I have some anecdotes to share in that regard, but no, that there is I'll share this experience with you. The first time the ANC was removed from power in Johannesburg. Now, I used to be a councillor there, and I was a difficult youngster, and some of these call it hierarchical ANC politician types amongst the officials.
Right.
So I bumped heads with a couple of officials there, particularly about politics. And there was always a bit of a political tension there. And funnily enough, 10 years later, after I've left as a council, quite a while later, when the ANC went out of power, the very same officials, senior officials that I had difficulties with as a councillor, we actually had a very interesting, I think, started engaging with me at the time, because they said to me, listen, we're not DA, we're not DA, but we want government to work, and we think that you are going to give us the chance to actually do our job.
Right.
So that kind of thing does happen, yes.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think it's really sad that we've nurtured in this culture where people are so fearful of political parties. I suppose because they don't want to lose their jobs, to the point where they would vote against the interests of South Africa and South Africans because political bosses don't think they should take one direction. So that should change. And if I'm happy, I'm getting from you the sense that the DA is open to conversations that will even place it in an out of its normal comfort zone, if those conversations will lead to solutions that will be good, lasting for South Africa. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. The instinct cannot be to try to keep a comfort zone. We're going in, we must embrace change at all levels, because we're in a transition. I believe the DA, if we embrace that change, and if you look at the competencies we have, the resources, the organization, we can lead that change, and not lead because to dominate, but lead because we are well positioned, and if our hearts are there and our passion is there, we can really make a difference. I can one day be very proud of my contribution. I would have left the world a better place. Same with everyone else involved.
Right.
So yes, at the same time, as just caveat that I said earlier on, it is not you don't win this through enthusiasm and high hopes alone. It's hard work.
I can imagine.
Generating
that consensus.
Right. It's hard work.
Boots on the ground, right? Do you guys feel threatened by the arrival of maybe what's going to be a plethora of independent candidates? There's going to be people springing up, and over the next year ahead of the next elections, we're going to see people coming up to say, I think I can be the best president for South Africa. Do you guys, as a traditional political party, feel threatened by those people?
Well, look, if you use the term feel threatened, in my mind, I feel threatened when a guy stands with a gun next to me wanting my wallet. That makes me feel threatened. The rest
Right.
is things that you should be concerned about or give due weight. So we have the political market fragmenting. Of course, there's risks for the DA as well, because we are, in a sense, one of the incumbent parties. And, somehow, even if we were the party that were keeping, the flame of opposition alive and fighting the ANC, people, they're so tired of the ANC, they just project it on all politicians,
Right.
So there is that risk. That fragmentation might affect the DA as well. But I can also tell you there's huge opportunities. Because much as there might be people that decide, well, listen, I actually don't like any party that's in government, I'm going to vote for a guy on his clown suit on a horse, that's fine. That's their right.
Right.
Much as there's that type of risk, there's a huge opportunity for us you can see it. We actually, it's happening with the kinds of successes we're having at a policy level, at a national level as well. There is a new enthusiasm. I think let's put it this way: if we don't actually benefit in the long run in terms of growth, then we would have made some serious mistakes here. Then there's something in this environment that I don't see. It's something unpredictable in this environment. But all things being equal, we're quite confident we will be continuing our growth, and we're in a very good space in the DA.
Okay, we're pretty much at the end. I have two last questions. One is, why don't you, the DA, which has such a strong voice in Parliament, propose that all individuals who have been implicated in state capture and other forms of corruption, including those who are current parliamentarians, be removed from those positions until they get their names legally cleared? Why did you suggest that? There's some kind of step aside, national step aside.
The DA has consistently been shouting for exactly that. It's remember who took the government to court with the spy tapes. This state capture report, everything that is now being shaken out of and coming to light, the light that is being cadre deployment that the DA has been fighting since day one, since the early 90s. Now people have seen what we were warning against, and all those things ultimately, and I'm proud of this. I'm not making a false claim, but the predominant energy and consistency and years of siege warfare that was waged by the DA. We are very proud that eventually justice is busy happening. Justice is coming, maybe not fast enough, but to us it is absolutely, it's a matter of rule of law. If you committed a crime and it's been proven in a court of law, then you go to court.
No, but people say we have not been charged. That's a problem. So you have also people who shouldn't be in Parliament, who are sitting there as parliamentarians, just implicate. But we have Batohi. I mean, do you trust Batohi? Is she doing her job?
What I'm saying is for a system, for a system to remove people, let's say officials, obviously there has to be, there's a court process.
Right.
If you're referring to members of Parliament, that's up to the ANC. That's the ANC that kept the people there. They don't have to re-elect members of Parliament again and again. That is squarely on them. There's nothing wrong with the law in that sense. It's a political weakness there.
But we should have a system, a culture, and a culture cannot be legislated upon, where people feel ashamed to walk into a room when they know that they've done something wrong. But in South Africa, we don't have that culture. People walk with chin up, when they know that they've been implicated in serious stuff.
I've stolen, so I've arrived. No, that's not right. It's now you're preaching to the converted.
Okay. So my last question to you is this: is there something that you hope that I would ask you before you came here that you were disappointed I didn't ask you? Something that you want to say, your last shot, as it were?
No, I came here. I think you intended it to be that way. I didn't come here with a script. I didn't come here with any kind of expectation or fear, for that matter. I took it as a conversation that has its own rhythm, and I really enjoyed it too. No, here's my expectation. Keep doing it. Keep doing this.
Thank you.
Don't ever stop. That's
Thank you. Well, to our listeners out there, it's been a conversation, an amazing conversation that I also really, truly enjoyed with Thomas Walters from the DA. If you've stayed with us up to now, you obviously enjoy the content of these conversations. Please continue sharing, subscribing to our platform, but also if you can help WorldView, you can write to us at worldview.help@gmail.com. Thank you very much. This is Soli Moeng. And Thomas, thank you very much for making it to the party.
And thank you very much. I much appreciate it.